Good morning, guten Morgen, buenos dias, god morgon, and welcome to the very first digital Svemin environmental conference. We are broadcasting live from a studio right below the Svemin office here in downtown Stockholm. We are very excited to spend the next 2 days with you to talk about one of our favorite topics, sustainable raw materials supply. My name is Emma Hardmark and I'm a Director of Communications at Svemin, and I will be moderating this event and do my best to stick to the schedule. This pandemic doesn't come with many advantages, but one surely is the increased easiness to have global speakers attending conferences. We are very happy to have with us today and tomorrow more than 30 speakers talking live from Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, Luleå, Gothenburg, Umeå, Kiruna, Boliden, Karlstad, Uppsala, London, Berlin, and from here in Stockholm. The international presence is the reason why we have chosen to give this conference in English. If you have any questions or thoughts to share with our speakers, please let us know. There will be, at the end of each of our 5 sessions, there will be a panel discussion with our presenters and sometimes even a few additional speakers. So they will all be happy to take questions from you. And my colleague Linus Ljungström will now explain how to ask a question in this format. Linus?
Good morning. My name is Linus and I will take care of your questions during this conference. We will use Menti, so please go to menti.com and enter the code 6839136 to get to this conference presentation. We will ask you some questions, but above all, we would like you to ask questions to the speakers. You can ask questions on all the slides and write your name and to whom the question is for. Keep in mind that we are running a tight schedule, so questions from the audience will be answered as time allows. Feel free to use the mobile device to log on to Menti. And again, that's menti.com. The code is 6839 and 136. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Linus. As I mentioned, this is the very first digital conference that we host, so please be patient would we run into any technical or other troubles along the way. The theme for this year's environmental conference, as well as this opening session, is sustainable raw materials supply. How does the modern society meet the need for metals and mineral in a truly sustainable way? Just a week ago, European leaders launched the European Raw Materials Alliance, ERMA, as one of the actions connected to the recently updated critical raw materials list. For Sweden, being one of the main mining countries within the EU, ERMA will mean a great deal. Sweden has good potential for over half of the elements on the critical raw materials list. And we are in the front line regarding skills and development of technologies, production efficiency and environment protection and sustainability. If European and Swedish policymakers are serious about production of sustainable raw materials and this quest to reduce the dependency on import, primary production here in Europe and especially in the Nordics should be promoted, not hindered, as we unfortunately see many examples of today. Well, enough said as an introduction. Let's start. 1 year ago, she had just started her new assignment as CEO of the Swedish Mining Association. Now, she has learned to tell the difference between a rock and a hard place. I'd like to welcome Maria Sunnér Fleming.
Thank you very much, Emma, for that. I hope I can see the difference now. And very much welcome to all of you in this conference, the Svemin First Environment Conference that goes digital. And as Emma said, the overarching theme of this is sustainable supply of raw materials, which also is very much in the focus of the society discussion today. If we are going to go green and digital, how are we going to get all these materials that we will need in this transition? From how much will we need and what kind of materials? From where will we get them? And under what conditions are they produced? Many of these things are are themes that we are going to discuss during these days. And as was mentioned earlier, the EU Commission just launched their raw material strategy with 10 action points, of which one was further developed last week with the Raw Material Alliance that was launched. And as Emma said, the updated list of the critical raw materials is very important for a mining country like Sweden, where we see that we have the possibility to mine over half of these elements. Even though we don't do that today, we have still hurdles in developing new mines in Sweden, as well as in the rest of Europe. The permitting process is one of these things that we need to work on in order to streamline and make more efficient. But these 2 days, we are going to have several more information around what makes mining sustainable. This first session is going to be more overarching on the sustainable supply of raw materials, but then we are also going to hear more about several of the themes that are extremely important when we actually do a sustainable mine. Biodiversity, water management, tailing dam safety, and how can we certificate and trace that we are actually doing this in a sustainable way. So we are very happy that we have got together this very interesting conference with all these knowledgeable speakers from all over the world, really. So we would very much like to welcome you, everybody, to this conference. But before I leave the word back to Emma, I just want to say also that Svemin is facing a critical situation during next year because our many-year environment expert Lars-Åke is leaving us due to retirement. So we are actually looking for a new, very knowledgeable person in order to replace Lars-Åke. So this is your chance, all of you out there working with environmental issues in the mining sector, to come forward and make contact. That we would be very interested in getting to know you. So thank you, and back to Emma.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. As we all know, the modern society is such, and the green transition increases the demand for metals and minerals. And there are a lot of opinions out there on this matter, but we want to open this conference by getting the facts straight. And we will do this by inviting Professor Kristina Vanhainen of Luleå Technical University. She will set the scene for us. Please, Kristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emma. And good morning, everyone. I will try to share my screen now. There we go. So, can you see my screen now and hear me, I hope?
Ja.
Emma?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it's okay. Yeah, so my name is Kristina Vanhainen, and I'm a chair professor in ore geology at LTU, Luleå University of Technology, and I will talk briefly about the demand for minerals and metals, about Sweden as mining nation today, and then I will focus a little bit more on the potential of the Swedish bedrock. So these are two pictures that I believe many of you are familiar with, and they actually give us the answer to why we see this accelerating demand for minerals and metals right now. And first, to the left, we have human populations and economies that are increasing. And we can also see an increased standard of living in many developing countries. And secondly, to the right, innovations and new technologies during the last hundreds of years have constantly increased. It has constantly increased not only the volume, but also the number of metals and minerals that we use. And above all, we now have a very steep rise of green energy technologies that is expected to lead to a significant growth in the demand of both base and critical metals. And so one way of meeting this demand is, of course, by recycling the metals that we have used, and we are actually very good at this. In Europe, almost 100% of the base metals used in daily life is recycled. But this does not account for the critical metals. So if we look at the metals contained in a mobile phone, for example, down to the left and right, and we compare that with the periodic table at the top right, showing the degree of recycling for different elements, it's obvious that half of the material used in a phone isn't recycled at all today, or less than 1%. So we simply do not know yet how to recycle these metals, and the phone also is not produced in such a way that it's meant to be recycled. So this is, of course, a big challenge that we have. And another thing maybe that we tend to forget about when it comes to the recycling of today is that huge amounts of base metals are bound in infrastructure for very, very long periods of time, and in that sense are not really accessible. So we can summarize by saying that metals and minerals are natural resources that are indispensable for the sustainable development of our society. And we can also state that fossil-free energy requires more metals than fossil-produced energy. And I think the electric cars is a very good example of this, because if we look, of course, we have the battery metals added for the electric car, cobalt and lithium and so on. But also the base metals. If we look at copper, for example, we need 3 times more copper in the electric car. And if we look at nickel, it's even 10 times more nickel in the electric car than in the petrol car. So it's very clear. And you can also see the other green technologies with solar panels and windmills, that it's a lot of metals that are needed to build this. So demand increases for sure. And while recycling will play an important role in meeting demand, the primary production will still be needed. And a sustainable development, therefore, requires a combination of several actions. So less consumption, of course. We need improved recycling and also improved product design so that we can recycle in a better way. And improved extraction techniques are also very important so that we can actually utilize the ores and the tailings and waste material in a more efficient way. But also exploration for new resources. And of course, there are also other things that we should think of. But I would like to emphasize that this primary production will still be needed, since I can see also on EU level that this is still not really understood, I would say. So how does Sweden then contribute to the supply of metals? Well, as most of you know, Sweden is a major player in mining within EU. We are the #1 producer of iron, lead and zinc, and on 2nd, 3rd and 4th place when it comes to silver, copper and gold. And also to the right, the diagram to the right, we can see that if we look at the world production, Sweden actually stands for 1 to 2 or even more % of the world production for most of these metals. EU produces about 3% and consumes more than 20% of the yearly global metal production. And of course, there's a bit of a mismatch there. A continuous addition of metals is required, but very few giant deposits have been discovered lately, and no new mines have opened in Sweden in 12 years. So we keep saying that there is a good potential to find more metals in Sweden, but how can we actually claim that? What do we build that on? So in ore geology, which is my research subject, we study the processes that concentrate metals and minerals in the crust. And most ore deposits are related to specific geological environments, so where the most productive then are mantle plumes, continental rift zones, and continental arcs. And to the left here, you can see the bedrock map of Sweden produced by the Swedish Geological Survey. and where the different colors are different rock types. And we can then see from studying these different rock types that we've actually had these types of environments in Sweden about 1 to 2 billion years ago. So therefore we can state that we have areas where the geology allows certain ore types to occur. So what do we know about the potential then? Well, SGU recently mapped the occurrences of innovation critical metals in existing deposits based on resource estimations, and also in general in Sweden based on both old and new chemical data. So these mineralizations that you see on the map to the left, they are a fact. We know that they exist, and we know a little or quite a lot about them. So if we look closer at lithium, for example, the orange dots in this map. So the supply of lithium comes from two main sources globally. It's either lithium brines, as you see to the left, and or it's pegmatites, a certain type of pegmatite. And since we don't have brines or salars here in Sweden, we focus on the pegmatites. And lithium-rich pegmatites are quite rare, and they make up only about 0.1% of all known pegmatite occurrences. And they are formed from specific type of magmas generated by melting of metasedimentary rocks in the crust. And they occur in crustal domains, including significant amounts of metasedimentary rocks. So it's a very specific type of environment to look for. So then we can use that in order to actually find them. So what else do we know about them? We know that many lithium pegmatites have been documented in Sweden, mostly due to coincidences during early mapping and exploration activities quite a long time ago. So a lot in the 80s, 70s and 80s. So we can add these occurrences to the map, although in this case we know nothing about grades, chemistry, anything like that. We only know that a lithium mineral have been found in a pegmatite at these locations where you see the stars. So what about the totally unknown then? We have 4% outcrop exposure in Sweden. The rest is hidden beneath the moraine. So we can just imagine what we haven't yet found, I would say. And we can do the same exercise with vanadium, for example, just to show that this map can be built upon, I think. So if we look at vanadium, the supply of vanadium comes from 4 main sources, and 2 of these are relevant for the Swedish bedrock. So we have the titanomagnetite with vanadium in layered intrusions, and we have shale-hosted vanadium deposits. So what else do we know then from the map that SGU has compiled? Well, again, we have put in some more stars here. We know more occurrences that have been documented due to coincidences. So it's people that have been out and just happen to fall on one of these occurrences, and they have reported it. So we don't know much else. So to me, it's kind of obvious that if we want to know more about the actual potential of the Swedish bedrock, there is a clear need to develop capacity in geological mapping and actually look into these mineralizations that we know of and look them up more carefully and in more detail. So the potential for Sweden to provide more metals, of course, also lies in the already crushed material produced at our present and also historic mines. So if we list the metals and minerals studied in waste dumps and tailings in Swedish mines, we will end up with at least half of those listed as critical metals by EU, if not more, maybe 70%. So this is, of course, the low-hanging fruits from a more urgent supply risk perspective that we should also develop here in Sweden. So time is running out, so I will just end with this one. So nowadays we work with 4D modeling of the entire ore districts in Sweden, and also with 3D visualization of ore minerals in drill cores and in rocks by tomography, to do more efficient exploration and to be able to predict the recovery of metals, to better utilize ores and tailings, as I mentioned before. And so I would like to end there and just say that a lot more can be done. Most of these occurrences were found long time ago, and since then, not so much have been studied on them. And with these new technologies that we have, I think we could really do some studies and be able to tell the actual potential more clearly. So I will end there. Thank you very much.
More geologists are needed. Okay, should I repeat? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. It was an excellent first presentation for this long environmental conference that we set the scene straight. But what I understand from your presentation is that there is a lot more out there to be found, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Or identified, explored. But that would require a lot more geologists and mining engineers, right?
Yes, I think the geological mapping has decreased in Sweden. So we need those skills again to build up those skills.
Being a professor at the mining university, how intense is the course demand from potential students this fall? How interested are the students of today for these kind of educations?
There is I would not say a huge interest. We have difficulties, maybe that the youth nowadays are very interested in these green technologies, the green shift, but they maybe don't relate that to the mining industry, or rather the opposite. So that's our challenge to actually convince them that this is where you should develop your skills if you want to work with the green shift.
I agree. What do you think? What ought to be done to raise the awareness in the general public? Like you said, people in general are not aware of where metals come from and where they are, how much they are needed in our modern society. What ought to be done to bridge that gap, as you see it?
I think that we should be more communicative. We need to. I mean, we lack geology in the basic school in Sweden and in many countries. There's too little room for geology in school, so people haven't heard about it and they don't really know what it is. So that's the real problem, I would say.
Okay, so geology should be like a in back to the school, the compulsory school. Okay, thank you very much, Christina. Do you, as a viewer, have any questions for Christina? Please ask the question like my colleague Linus explained earlier. You go to the menti.com platform and you use our conference code 6839136. So 6839136. Okay. As I mentioned in my introduction, the European Raw Materials Alliance will mean a great deal for a mining country such as Sweden. And we will soon dig into the details in this document. But first, I would like to check what you know about barriers, what's hindering. So I would like you to go to the Menti platform, like I mentioned, and use the passcode 6839136. And could we, Magnus, the studio guy, could we have the first Menti question on screen? Great. Now we should all see the question. What is the main barrier to Europe improving its metal self-sufficiency in the next decade? Is it availability of finance, or is it regulatory environment, or is it global competition, or societal acceptance? So go to the Menti platform and vote. And we can use this as a background when I start talking about the introduction of our next speaker, because the next speaker will give us the answer, the correct answer of this poll. And he is the Director of Communications and Public Affairs of Eurometeo. So it's Chris Heron. Please join us.
There we go. Okay, yeah, great to be here. It reminds me actually of being in Sweden last April, where I had the pleasure of visiting Boliden's Aitik mine in northern Sweden. Not only was it an opportunity to show off to friends and family about being in an Arctic climate for the first time, I was also able to see the launch of their new electrified mining trolley to drastically help to reduce emissions. And I think that really brings together two principles of the presentation today, principles of resilience and sustainability, and furthering Europe's raw materials agenda. In my presentation, I'm going to cover three elements. First, I'm going to touch on metals to supply Europe's green and digital transition. I think very complementary messages to those we already heard from Christina, with our view on why Europe needs a competitive and sustainable value chain. I'm also going to talk about the investment potential into European metals from our membership and where we see our companies are looking to invest when the conditions are right. Finally, I'm going to touch upon those four parameters we had on the quiz, regulatory conditions that needed those investments to happen, and talk about four pillars that we think will be needed in the next 5 to 10 years to make sure the ambitions can become reality. Before I dive into those details, just a quick introduction to Eurometeo. We're the trade association representing Europe's collective non-ferrous metals value chain. Our members are active from the mine through to the end of life. And you can see in the slides, it's quite wide-ranging across the EU member states. Over 900 large-scale facilities, plus SMEs, and around 500,000 direct jobs. And within that, we always point to the example of Sweden and also Finland as one of the only areas of Europe where we have a fully functioning raw materials value chain at each stage. We've mentioned a lot the mining, but we also have Europe's largest electronics recycler in Rönnskär in Sweden and many other operations. So when we talk about raw materials going forwards, I can only agree that Sweden will for sure be at the center of plans. And that's so important, as we know in the audience rates, a message from Christina, because much higher volumes of these metals and minerals will be required for Europe's green and digital transition. My slide is showing a World Bank study published earlier this year, which really showed globally the scale of metals and minerals we'll need from technologies ranging from vehicles to solar power to wind and batteries. They projected that up to 500% of some metals will be required for the global energy transition. And as Christina said, that's for sure the specialty metals like lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, but it's also base metals, aluminium, copper, and nickel in a range of applications. And our conviction as an industry is that Europe really needs to have a full and sustainable metals value chain at each stage. Just breaking that down into three parts on this screen. First, clearly, circular economy must be a central priority. We think Europe has to make use of all the metals it can that it's disposing of. Metals have permanent properties, which situates them very well for a circular economy, as long as the economic and technical case can be there for their recycling. We're already doing great things with base and precious metals. We also need to advance and address a lot of the critical metals moving forwards. And that needs to be combined with looking into our sustainable mining capacity, for sure in the Nordics, but also Iberia, Balkans, Ireland, and more. There's a lot of potential there to build up sustainable mining in complement to recycling, and we'll definitely need both. And thirdly, we can't forget the refining and fabrication stages, what we need to take the raw material through to the product and applications. And we think there's great potential to invest into value-added steps for transferring the raw materials to the market. And other areas of the world, such as China, have been very effective there. Clearly, we're going to need all steps together. We're also going to need a diversified global supply to go alongside that. And an added challenge you see at the bottom of the diagram is that we have to align all of these steps with our climate neutrality and zero pollution goals, which we'll address later in the presentation. We really welcome the Raw Materials Alliance, which has already been mentioned as a welcome model to start to tackle this challenge. I won't go into too many details on it, but we're really happy to see all of these metals and minerals to be targeted, to have the opportunity for consultation, to address bottlenecks, to look at concrete investment cases, and build societal understanding and acceptance. For us, a key success factor is going to be having a dialogue opportunity, bringing all parties around the table. And within that, we have to look at the environmental social challenges as well. That's what I wanted to say on the first part. Now I'll just dive into investment potential on European metals, where companies are looking to invest. We've done a survey of our membership to check what investments are there in the pipeline, either currently announced or to be announced in the future, where companies are looking to make progress, but might not be able to currently due to various financial or regulatory conditions. One message I want to give at the top is that if we're not investing, then in the next 10 to 20 years, our import reliance will increase further. You can see on this slide in the middle column, Europe's global share at each of the different value chain stages. We know that we have a very low share of the world total for our mining capacity, and even lower for our critical raw materials capacity. That builds up for our smelting and refining. And in recycling, we actually perform extremely well. Around a third, almost a third of the metals recycled in the world are recycled here in Europe. And that's our main route currently for accessing several critical raw materials. If we're not investing into those stages, then the situation will worsen by 2040. We would estimate that we would have up to 50% less base mining capacity due to the depletion of existing projects if they're not replaced by new ones. And we continue to have a full import reliance for critical materials as their demand skyrockets. On the smelting and refining side, there's going to be a big challenge for existing operations to advance towards the EU and climate and environmental goals. If those investments aren't able to be made, then it will become much more difficult to be doing business from 2030 onwards with the ambitious climate targets we're now working with. And we'll also not be able to have a new refining capacity for batteries or other high growth segments. On the recycling side, we will, of course, I think, maintain our recycling industry. Our question would be whether we can take advantage of the new opportunities from batteries, from solar, from other strategic technologies that will start to come available in the next decade. Here we're competing a lot with Asia, who start to see this advantage. When we talk to our members, there's a lot of projects at each stage which have potential to move forwards. On the mining side, to build up capacity for our base metals and our critical metals, and you can see with the flags on the screen that Sweden is a central part of new ambitions there. And also on the climate environmental side, to invest into furthering progress there and our already high standards. On the mining side, we see that electrification of operations is a key opportunity moving forwards. For primary production, climate and environment is also a central investment priority due to how electricity intensive those production processes are. So our companies hope to be taking advantage of low CO2 electricity and also developing breakthroughs to address remaining direct emissions, while also hopefully having new capacity for battery metals and the several plans ongoing for graphite, for nickel, and lithium. With recycling, there's a lot more we can do as well with capacity. If we'll have more batteries and electronics waste in the next decade, we'll need capacity to treat it. But there's also a lot of innovation with our existing capacity to keep advancing our processes, to get better at sorting our waste and to have better recycling efficiencies, especially from complex inputs. And we can also see a lot of partnerships become available, announced between electric vehicle manufacturers, battery manufacturers, metals producers, and more. Across all of these points, high environmental social standards have to be the norm, and the EU is a place that is requiring that as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for furthering things at all three stages. The challenges are some of these projects are stalled, they're delayed, there is some lack of certainty as we move forwards, and that would lead to the third bit of my presentation, is to talk about the regulatory conditions we would see as necessary to help turn that ambition into a reality. And to close, I'm just going to touch upon 4 pillars, which correspond a lot with the questionnaire that was answered earlier. Now, we've asked our members to develop their ambition for investing into the green and digital transitions and to outline where the conditions need to be to allow those investments to take place. Bringing 25 CEOs from the metal sectors together, they identified 4 pillars: finance, global action, sustainability, and a level playing field. I'm going to quickly dive in quite high speed through these 4 pillars, but would welcome you to look further into the full declaration we've prepared at the link on the screen, where you can read more detail about the messages that we've given. The first pillar is unlocking finance and investment. A lot of the projects which companies have in planning are highly capital intensive. We need to grow our metals value chain while it's advancing towards climate neutrality. Now, the largest scale project which we were aware of was up to 1 billion euros in terms of the investment cost for a large scale nickel mine. At the same time, when we talk about climate innovation, it's real breakthroughs that are needed, which have a lot of risk and have a lot of cost involved. The economic environment in the next 5 years is likely to be very negative, as we know from the COVID-19 downturn. The industry is already suffering from oversupply in several areas and reduced demand from automotive construction sectors. So a message we're giving, and the European Commission and others have been very receptive here, is that the EU and the member state funds need to be directed towards some of these raw materials projects. And that's also a way to make sure that environmental and social requirements are kept with. So the actions here are to support some projects in moving forwards through EU and national funds, and there's a lot there with potential: the Just Transition Fund, ETS Innovation Fund, and several more. And we're hoping the Alliance will allow that to crystallize. The second pillar is being bolder on the global stage. Now, Europe in the last 10 years, its industrial footprint has declined in the metal sector, while China's has skyrocketed. They really see their metals industry as a strategic industry. They put it at the center of industrial policies, and it receives huge subsidies. China now has a 50% global share of the market for most base metals. You can see on the left of the screen the trajectory this has taken, and an 80% share for critical raw materials. And also with its Belt and Road Initiative, it looks globally to aggressively take up global primary resources, even including some in our neighborhood, such as Serbia, now are looking into Greenland and more. A key warning sign is that environmental considerations are low on the agenda. And so we're always talking with EU policymakers about being more bold in terms of trade defense, in terms of our sourcing strategy and reform of the World Trade Organization. So we need to create a safe level playing field for the producers we have in Europe. And alongside that, we really think that we have an opportunity to make sustainability our metals differentiator. 3 elements here on the screen that make up parts of sustainability and where Europe, we think, stands out. On the climate side, it uses up to 8 times less CO2 to produce base metals here in Europe compared with China. And if we were to have decarbonized power across Europe, we'd have an 81% reduction in our CO2 footprint. On the recycling side, as Christina already mentioned, we perform really well. Over half of the metals we produce are actually from recycling versus less than 18% in the rest of the world. And on the environmental protection side, there's been a lot in global media recently about the environmental footprint, about the supply of some of these metals and minerals. Operations in Europe and Sweden and other areas are meeting the highest environmental and social standards that are kept with. So we think there's an action there for the future in terms of developing markets for these low carbon, sustainable and ethically sourced metals while advancing the circular economy at the same time, to start to show that if we're producing metals to such a good degree, there's a market there that can be an advantage. And the last of the pillars is to establish a level playing field for EU companies. I touched upon this when talking about the global stage. We know, and it's a bit of a simplified diagram, but we know that Chinese operators are lifted up through subsidies, a lack of environmental scrutiny, and easy financing. We're aware in Europe that in the next 5 to 10 years, the pressures could increase, high and rising power costs, increasing costs for environmental and social compliance, potentially less available finance. That's made more challenging for the fact that metals are the only basic commodity sold at a globally set price. So wherever metals are produced, they have to be put on the market at that price. And that requires producers to take on those regulatory costs directly. So when we look at regulation moving forwards, I don't think it's about subsidizing the industry. We always say our message is not that. But with the regulation we have, we can do things like prioritizing competitively priced low carbon electricity, which is such a major cost factor for producers. And also we can give predictability through environmental and chemicals legislation as the requirements increase in the future, making sure they're feasible for companies to deal with, and attacking things as well, such as permitting and more. And that brings me to the end of the presentation, a conclusion. We have our 4 pillars: finance, global action, sustainability, and a level playing field, where we think if we can tackle these all together through the Raw Materials Alliance, we can help to incentivize investment into our sustainable metals value chains alongside a diversified supply from global sources. This will help to deliver a secure supply for our new energy technologies and will also help to guarantee life cycle sustainability. It's now up to all parties to work together so these sustainability improvements can be made from a position of competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Could we have a result from the poll that the question we asked? All right, so this is the result. Chris, do you have any comments on this? The regulatory environment?
I'm just looking closely. I guess when we talk to our members, it's not a surprise. In terms of, there's a lot of projects in the pipeline which don't require financing to move forwards, but is blocked, for example, through the permitting process or through other elements of regulation which could be solved to allow them to move forwards without these massive financing requirements. So I guess in that way, not a surprise when we talk about climate costs, energy costs, and more.
Back in 2008, the EU launched the Raw Materials Initiative. What would you say are the main differences between the Raw Materials Initiative and now this European Raw Materials Alliance?
We're very encouraged by the positive example of the Batteries Alliance that the European Commission has already implemented to great success and the real tangible results that that's achieved, also including some of the raw materials supply. I think the model of bringing stakeholders together, also companies together with people along the value chain and the political prioritization that's been given shows us that this is something potentially more tangible now that we can move forwards with. And I think there's a lot of ambition and buy-in as well from the industry side to commit their resources into it. I wasn't around in 2008, so I can't say how things were back then.
Okay. So, thank you, Chris, for now. You're coming back for the final panel discussion. So, if you as viewers have any questions for Chris or Christina or the other speakers, please let us know and use the Menti platform, as I've been repeating. But now we have some questions for you, our viewers. So I would like you to go to the Menti platform to answer those questions. And again, I repeat, the menti.com, and it's a passcode 6839136. And could we please have on screen the first question for the audience? We would like to find out who you are. We would like to get to know you. So where do you work, or who are you representing today? So we would like to find out whether you are employed representing a mining company, or if you represent an organization representing the raw materials industry, or a consultant firm, or you work at the university, or do you work at a governmental agency or county administrative board or a ministry, or is it something completely different? So do we have could we get the result from? Okay, excellent. Now, perfect. So most people work at the mining company, right? And the second largest is the consultant firm. Okay. Thank you. We have a second question for you guys. We would like to find out more about who you are. So could we get the next Menti question for the audience, please? So, who are you? How old are you? Are you man, woman, or something else? Or, yeah. Okay. Yeah, could you please keep the screen of the result, please? Thank you. Okay. Keep on answering. I'll start introducing the next speakers. So we will get to know you, ask some more questions along the conference. Our next speakers, yes, there are 2 speakers in the next time slot. They both ticked the governmental agency option in the earlier question. And they represent the 2 governmental agencies that we in mining most often come across. It's the SGU, the Geological Survey, and the Swedish EPA. They have an interesting collaboration on battery value chain going on. It's our pleasure to invite now on stage Erika Ingvald. She is the head of division, Mineral Information and Mining Industry of the SGU. And we have Ove Fortkamp. He's the head of sustainability unit at the Swedish EPA. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emma. I was trying to unmute my microphone. It's really nice to be here, and we're really happy that you invited us. Now I wonder, do you see my screen, Emma?
Yes, we see it, but it's the annotation view that we see.
Yeah.
I see at least.
Is it better now? So, as I said, we're really happy to be here. Me and Ove from the Swedish EPA, we are going to present to you a collaboration that we have between us and the Energy Agency. It's a new government assignment that we got recently that we're very happy
Erika,
to get.
Could you, Erika,
yes?
could you please try again to share your screen? It doesn't come out right.
Okay. I'll do it again.
Now it's okay? No?
Yeah, sure.
Still not okay?
No, I'm going to redo this. Maybe it's better if I do my entire screen. No, it doesn't work. I do this. I tested this before. Can you see it now?
No, it doesn't come out right.
It shows only part
Okay,
of the
we try
slide.
to no? Okay, I get conflicting instructions. This is the wonders of live broadcasting.
No.
Now I can see it.
Okay, the studio guys are working hard at this moment.
So maybe I continue to talk.
You will get, Erika, you will get instructions how you can control your presentation. So this is the time when you with the viewers, you get up and go do some leg stretching, shoulder rolling, and you know, use this opportunity to sort of get up from your chair and start shaking. Like I said, this is the very first time that we ever have hosted this digital conference, so the studio guys are doing their best to sort this out, the wonders of technology. Okay, Erika, now the instructions are that you just say when we should flip your slides. Go to the next slide. You just say that, and we will do it from here. Okay.
Perfect.
Now the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, as I said, there is 3 of us. It's the Energy Agency, the Swedish EPA, and the Geological Survey. And what we're going to do is to collaborate regarding Sweden's part of the sustainable European battery value chain. And the complexity of the matter at hand would make it really difficult for any one of us to do this alone. We need this collaboration and we need the shared expertise. So we find great value in doing this together, all three of us, and to support the development of this new base industry and a sustainable battery value chain in Europe. Because it's really important and necessary, I would say, with a holistic view on the environmental, the social, and the economic sustainability. So we're starting off with weekly meetings to build this collaboration and to define action points to be performed further on. And we're also actually doing practical work. We're working with the first deliverable, the battery strategy that is developed by Fossilfritt Sverige and Energy. And we're learning from each other every day. Now you can switch slide.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And then now I'm taking over. We're making here a shared presentation. And I'm very pleased to be here to be able to present this. And now what you can see, I don't know, I only see a very small screen with this with the presentation. I hope you see it in the large screen. But it shows you some pictograms about a number of battery applications. And if you just reflect over batteries, you will come along that there are a lot of applications where we use them already in our daily life. And it has become obvious also over the past years that one of the cornerstones in the energy transition are also these batteries. We will need them also for our climate change mitigation. And as you also probably know, the vast majority of the batteries is produced for vehicles today, and they're produced outside Europe, in Japan, Korea, and China. And even the raw materials are produced elsewhere. We just heard that in the previous presentation as well. So there's a lack of supply also for materials, and we will need changes for that, also for the European car. And at the same time, we also see this as an opportunity, because there's an increasing demand. We also see that there's an opportunity to build a sustainable battery value chain in Europe. And we see that also Sweden has a very strong position in this and can be a strong partner, a strong part of this value chain. And that is what we also want to contribute. And this is also where this collaboration between our agencies can help, hopefully. And then, of course, we have also other actors. We just might mention, for example, Northvolt, whose business idea is to build the batteries, and they also want to recycle them. So just to see that there's the whole cycle. And this was also mentioned earlier in the presentation. The circularity is already one important aspect that we have to take into account. And then also we have a very good battery research, actually, which we also can make better use of. And then, of course, which was also mentioned, we have a lot of raw materials which we could use. And then another advantage which we have in Sweden is our energy mix, which is quite a lot of energy is already coming from renewable energy. Yeah, I say that we can take the next slide.
So I don't see the slides either, but the next slide show you it's an illustration of the sustainable value chain, but as a circle. And what it shows is in the center of this circle is cooperation, dialogue, and development of competence on many levels. And I think previous speakers have been touching upon this as well. And another part is, of course, the supply of primary and secondary raw materials needed for the industry to actually produce the batteries. And there is the production of battery cells and packs, as well as control systems that needs to be developed. And also very important, the use and reuse of different kinds of batteries and the recycling and circular material flows. And all parts of this circle or chain needs to be developed sustainably. So I think we move back to Uwe and the next slide.
well, yes, next slide. Yeah, that now it's coming up. And this is also a picture which is showing the expected demand for batteries, and what, even if it's very small, if you see it larger, I'm happy, but I see it very small. But what you can see from this slide is the pillars the columns are increasing very, very much, and this is the expected demand for increase for the demand for batteries, and this is expected to be very strong development where we'll need lots more batteries. And this is also where the European Commission has identified batteries as a strategic European value chain, where the EU wants to invest and to innovate more. And large part of this demand will come from the batteries for vehicles. This is what is expected as well. They're seeing that EU could have a possibility to get a share of global battery market worth on 250 billion euros from 2025 onwards. And today there's a very, very small share which Europe or EU has. It's only 3%. And also the EU's share of globally produced metals, we heard this before, is also a quite low one. So we could see that there's a really huge opportunity to improve that and to get a more important part of this market. And then we could switch slide and go back to Erika again.
Yeah, so the next slide shows the battery manufacturing capacity by country or region. And you can see on this slide that China actually has, of all the 382 gigawatt hours that are produced, China has a market share of 69%. And EU is, from this perspective, really vulnerable, I would say. And if you look at the geopolitical perspective. So if we can improve this, it would be really valuable to Europe. Next slide, and over again.
Yes, and then just also to show you, to put it into another context, to show that the assignment which we are working in with our 3 agencies will also contribute to a number of different goals, and which are then a number of them which are also environmentally related. For example, for Sweden, we have a called generation goal that we should leave a good state of environment for the next generation. And we have a number of environmental quality objectives that we would like to contribute to. And then, of course, also we have Agenda 30 Sustainable Development Goals, which we want to contribute to, and the EU Green Deal. And all of you know that we are facing climate change, and we have to contribute to climate mitigation. So we have to do some actions here. And that's what we like to contribute here. And then we can switch to the next slide again.
So the idea here is to develop a cooperation between our authorities to support the development of operations in Sweden, so that we really can contribute to a competitive value chain for batteries in the EU. And as Ove said before, we have good opportunities to produce batteries in a sustainable and resource-efficient way without toxic materials spreading to the environment, neither in the extraction phase nor the production phase of the chain. And also to contribute to eventually fill the circle of circular economy with materials needed, so that in the end the loop can be closed. Although, as Christina said in the first talk, that we will still need mining of primary materials for some time. And of course, as Ove also said, the production in Sweden benefits from an energy mix with very low carbon dioxide emission. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and to say a little bit more about our assignment, which we got from the government, so to show what is our task, what are we doing. So first of all, also just not to forget that we have the Swedish Energy Agency as well, on boat. It's us three who is mainly doing it, and then we will also, of course, involve with other agencies where it's necessary and where we see that we can benefit from each other. And we have our different roles in this, and we will see that who needs to be involved again with the goal to participate for a sustainable European battery value chain. And of course, we do not do this isolated. It's part of an European or global world, and we would look into also the European initiatives, and we have already seen some of them in the previous presentation, and see where we can collaborate, where we can get interaction with them. And then we will also see for our collaboration, of course, to see what they were mentioned, the collaborative regulatory frameworks, and this is of course something which we, as our agencies, governmental agencies, look into, and to see what are possible obstacles, what are prerequisites, and this is again, of course, connected to EU legislation ongoing or on the way. So it's both a Swedish part, but also an EU part into this. And there we could switch to the next slide.
So within this assignment, we will follow the developments in the expected need for raw materials. We will analyze whether there are any unjustified obstacles to establish our part of the European value chain. We will contribute to the transition to circular economy, and we will assess the need to clarify priorities for actions. Next slide.
Yeah, and now I'm back again, and we will look into Erika already mentioned it, there's a battery strategy which is prepared right now by Fossil-Free Sweden to see how Sweden can work. We will analyze this and see what recommendations give there. We will check or implement the bilateral innovation partnerships with France and Germany, and we will also look to the international collaboration, which is important to support the development. Operations in Sweden can form sustainable, competitive value chain for batteries in Europe. And I think that is our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have we lost Emma?
I can see the studio, but I cannot hear something. Anything.
I can only see you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's only the two of us in the meeting.
So is it working now?
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Loud and clear.
Great.
Excellent. We do this the old-fashioned way. Your agencies, they do have a slight different purpose. How important is a joint assignment like this one, would you say? What is your take on that? Erika? How important is a joint project together with the EPA?
So when we start to dig into this from the different angles, I think we've already found that not one of us could have done this alone, because there are so many aspects of this in each of our expert areas that and it need to be connected. So for us to do this together is crucial, I would think. And I think we are developing a lot of new knowledge between us because we're sharing our own expertises. So I think this will. I think the battery industry will benefit from us collaborating on this.
Okay. So what do you say, Ove? How important is this kind of joint assignment working with the SGU?
Yeah, I think as Erika mentioned, it is very important, because then we have different angles looking at. We have a little bit different priorities, but all of them are important. And in the end, then for the battery industry, it is worthwhile to see how the agencies work together, and not that we maybe come with different angles from our view, but just to see that we can cooperate and see, well, we get a better understanding of each other, so that it's more a common message that we can send from the agencies.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you very much again, Uwe and Erika. Please stay on screen, because now we will invite all speakers at the same time. So it's time for the first panel discussion. Are you all present now? Could I please have that on my screen here in the studio too, please? Oh, perfect. Now you might notice some new faces. Actually, there should be 3 new faces. We have Peter Handley. He is from the European Commission and head of the Energy Intensive Industries and Raw Materials Unit at DG GROW. And we have from Euromind, the Deputy Director, Johannes Drulsma. And we have from Stockholm Environment Institute, the Senior Research Fellow, Olle Olsson. Happy to have you all on board. So, I'd like to ask our newcomers, you have been watching the presentations this morning. What would you say are the greatest challenges in fulfilling these EU raw material strategy at this point? Johannes, what do you say, for example?
Good morning. Yeah, so kicking straight off with the greatest challenges, hey? I actually found the session very positive in terms of the achievements that we've made as Europeans over, if I think over the last 10 or 15 years. I think you can hear there's much more common purpose across the board, much more common understanding of what's really needed to secure our industries here in Europe. So a couple of challenges, perhaps. I think we still have work to do to further promote our environmental performance here in Europe. Mm-hmm. Even within the Commission, I feel there's some hesitancy or reluctance to really understand and acknowledge that we are leaders in the field here in Europe. Our regulations require us to be, and we're competing very well on that basis. And perhaps the other remaining challenge for all of us, I think, is to look even further up the supply chain. We've talked about mining, processing, recycling. Christina mentioned exploration. We will not have mining projects to open in the next 10 years if we're not exploring our territory.
True.
Not finding the deposits to mine.
Mm. Do you, I guess you, Olle Olsson, you have a slight different view, or maybe you haven't. Please, what are your thoughts on what needs to, what greatest challenges do we have in fulfilling a raw materials supply strategy here?
Yeah, I think the key challenge, I guess, is to combine get to the pace. If you look at, I come from largely in terms of decarbonization of the global economy, basically, and of Europe as well. So obviously, for then you need a lot of materials going into that. So, and that is a project or an endeavor that's really needs to be accelerated. We really need to get things on the ground, get the things, build things, and deploy things, and start phasing out the fossil parts of the economy. But I think in a broader environmental research community, it's becoming increasingly clear that one of the in terms of getting the materials, getting the infrastructure up, those things take time. They tend to be controversial, and there tends to be quite a lot of legal wrangling around getting it, because you tend to when you have interference with lots of different stakeholders. So. And at the same time, you don't want to push this too hard, because then you'll alienate key stakeholders, and you don't want to do that, because you want to have this decarbonization project also as a common societal effort. So I think I think those are the three components. So the pace of getting the decarbonization going, the sort of the incompatibility with the general process of setting up infrastructure and developing material supply chains, and also how to sort of get a broader stakeholder buy-in on these different ventures. I think those are the key challenges.
Okay, thank you, Ole. What does the European Commission say? Peter Handley, are you with us? Hello, Brussels. Okay, Peter, I saw your face earlier. Is he with us, Magnus?
He's here but muted. We can't hear him.
Okay, so please, Peter, unmute.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I may be invisible, but I'm unmuted. So thank you very much. What I would say is that the biggest challenge is to now move, building on the political momentum that we've been able to create with our communication and action plan on critical raw materials. The key concepts are resilience and open strategic autonomy, and building up European competitiveness as we make the big transition towards climate and environmental goals. I would agree with what the previous panelists have said. For me, the main thing is that we need to get all the stakeholders on the same page. One of the goals we have in our action plan is to collect and bring together what companies need, what member states need, and what we can do at the European level to make things happen, whether this be on diversifying from third countries or making things happen with our domestic resources in Europe. And we need to do this in a fast way because everyone else in the world is moving fast. So agility, speed, but it's not speed of a conversation, it's speed of action that we need. And when I say getting all stakeholders on the same page, I really mean that, because I think member states and regions, businesses understand what is required. But when we launched the Alliance last week, we had a letter signed by 234 environmental and civil society organizations, basically saying, we don't agree with your hypothesis that demand for raw materials needs to grow. It needs to go down. You need to commit to an overall reduction in resource use in Europe. So there's a fundamental disagreement with the proposition that demand for raw materials will grow. And secondly, there's a deep opposition in that same letter to doing more greenfield mining. The solution would, in their view, be largely met by recycling. So I think we need to make sure that we listen to these concerns and we actually engage constructively in a conversation. But we're not going to achieve our climate goals unless we can bring the whole of society along with us on what this entails in terms of the consequences for raw materials.
As we've heard several speakers mention that the green transition as such will need, it implies an increased demand for both old and new raw materials in order to be successful. So, but I'm curious about, for all of you speakers, how do you see, what is the role or responsibility for Sweden and the Nordic, the big mining countries in Europe, to fulfill the purpose of IRMA, this strive or the quest to reduce the dependency on import of raw materials? What is the role for Sweden, or responsibility, I'd say? Anyone? Erica?
Maybe I can take that. So I think we have a huge responsibility in Sweden and other countries as well within Europe, since we are a net user of all the raw materials produced in the world. I think it's our responsibility to also contribute. And actually, we asked the SOM Institute at Gothenburg University to make a poll, asked 1,500 Swedish citizens on their opinions on the mining industry. And one of the questions addressed the possibility for the mining industry to develop in Sweden to address to to be able to access more of those needed raw materials for the energy transition. And actually, of those who had an opinion, 90% were pro and 10% were against, approximately. And even in the Green Party, there was quite a big number of voters who actually thought that we should contribute with mining in Sweden. So there is a lot of support for mining as well. I don't think we should forget that, even though Peter's description is, of course, totally correct. There is a part of society that doesn't agree with this, with what we are trying to push for here. But it's important to remember that there also is a lot of support.
Thank you, Erika. From a Brussels point of view, Peter or Johannes, how do you see this responsibility for Sweden in this matter as a nation?
I think, if I may go first, I think Sweden can play a leading role in showing what is possible. We have Swedish companies already taking part in the IRMA Raw Materials Alliance. We have your minister who has said that he wants Sweden as a government to take part in this as well. I think you have many of the demonstration projects which show just what you can do if you start to build in one of these strategic areas. I mean, the whole battery stuff, where you've got the battery manufacturing linked in with the recycling, linked in with the raw materials and their processing. I think it's if you can demonstrate that it works in one case, I think it's easier to make the argument for doing it in other areas.
Do you agree, Johannes?
Yes, totally. In fact, I was going to answer very much the same way. I would hesitate to tell Sweden what its responsibilities are, but it certainly has a great opportunity. I would say it to continue its leadership role. I mean, Sweden is probably the most important mining country in Europe, and it certainly has demonstration projects to point to in Sweden. It has the whole value chain, which is very important. But equally, it has demonstration projects all over the world. I mean, it's exporting mining equipment and mining know-how and software all over the world. It's important that we keep that capacity in Europe so that we can benefit from our skills and development in that sector across Europe. I think as well, with the building of the gigafactory, the batteries factory, Sweden is demonstrating a certain amount of entrepreneurship, which might be relatively rare in Europe, and that's something to encourage and capitalize upon. As I'm speaking from the European Union, as it were, I would agree that the European Union as a whole, the member states as a collective, do have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to level that playing field that Chris was talking about, and to improve upon that statistic where we are using 20% of the world's metals and only really shouldering 3% of our responsibility to produce those materials, even though we have the capacity to produce them very well.
Just to build on that, Sweden also in Europe, but also on a global level, we've spoken about the need to have speed and agility at the same time as matching societal expectations here in Europe. We see that other areas of the world are also pushing on their mineral supply, and they focus a lot on speed and agility. We had an announcement from the US last week that they're really going to prioritize critical minerals too. There was a lot less there on the sustainability side when you read it through. And we've already mentioned as well China and the way they're pursuing. So I think it's also being able to show that it's possible to be quick and agile while matching their societal expectations and engaging with those challenges. And Sweden already is a long way in terms of having those conversations, as we heard from the survey. And when the Raw Materials Alliance was launched, the Commissioner Breton gave a very clear statement that we also can't be blind to the footprint of what we're importing into Europe already. And potentially looking at countries like Sweden, it's an opportunity to begin to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chris. Thank you very much for pointing that out for us.
Can I just add one thing, Emma?
Sure, please,
Yeah.
Christina, go ahead.
I would just say that one way to be responsible is also what LKAB are now doing by starting up this new remap project, which they had a press release about last week, to actually to take the step outside their comfort zone, so to say, and actually start to look at the mine waste in a serious way and start to produce maybe 4 or 5 new byproducts. I think that's the very, very interesting way to take responsibility.
I actually had another.
I would agree on that.
Yep.
Totally. And also Boliden is doing a great work with recycling electronic scrap. So I think it's they take leadership in that area too.
Thank you. I actually have the question has to do with that. Do you see, I mean, the increased demand of metals and minerals, do you see a risk of depletion of primary resources? When is peak metal?
If I can reply, I was quite involved in when we had the discussion on peak oil about 10 years ago. I had some very good friends who did a lot of research on that, and being burned from that whole situation, I'm not going to think about it, because we talk about peak of demand and peak of supply. So, and the discussion 10 years ago in relation to oil was about peak supply. Now everyone's talking about peak demand, because we're more going towards a future where we might not need that much oil. And I think depletion in terms of the physical resource, I don't think about that much. I'm thinking it's more a question of the sort of focusing on the social license to operate. So I think that's more of an important issue to deal with and to think about than the worrying about the actual physical supply. But I'm not a geologist, but that's just my background from the previous debate that we had.
And I would also like to point out that there is a difference between oil and metals, because you burn the oil, but the metals you can recycle once you get them up from the ground. It's not easy, I would say, but it can surely be done, and we are doing great work on that side. So that's one important difference between oil and metals.
We are starting to soon wrap this session, and I would like to ask Linus, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yep. Can you hear me? Yep. Here we go. We have some questions from the audience. One, for example, is what about the sustainable challenges versus the increasing demand? How do we become more sustainable? And I think that's not directed to anyone specific, but so I guess it's an open question for the panel. How do we become more sustainable and the sustainable challenges versus the increasing demand?
Anyone?
Yeah, maybe I can say some words for that. I would say it's not either or, it's both. We have to be both sustainable and to have this. We see this demand is happening. We need it. We need it also for being sustainable. So we will need a larger amount of these metals. But with that said, it's not just that we can continue with what we are doing. I mean, it's maybe not enough to just switch a diesel engine to an electric engine in a car and still drive large SUVs. Maybe this is not the future. Maybe we have to think more about other ways of transportation as well. So it's not enough just to make such a switch. But anyhow, we will need these metals. So then we have to see how we can do it in a sustainable way. So it's not either or, it's both, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I mean, I think it relates to the last question about depletion of metals, and to Peter's point about the great disagreement, really, between different sections of society about whether we really need to increase the production of these things or whether we should be reducing them. And I think it is a misunderstanding. I totally agree that a part of our sustainable future is meeting the increased demand for the raw materials that will enable us to be sustainable. And don't forget that sustainability also includes the social component, right? So, I mean, when sustainable development was sort of coined as a phrase in the 80s, it was very much looking at how do we improve the livelihood of all of these people, mostly outside of Europe, in a sustainable way. And I think the only way to do that is through mining, and then all the good things that come successively in the value chain and in society. So we all need to continue to do what we do well and continue to improve. And I think the more that Europe increases its engagement and involvement in sustainable value chains, the better we'll do.
I think one thing to emphasize there is the value chain. I work across the value chain, and I think we'll hear a lot more about that today in terms of traceability. And I really think you start trying to find ways to actually get like this, the green premium, as they call it. That's tend to be very elusive, but I think that is a target worth pursuing, to make sure that you'll actually, if you go the extra mile in terms of environmental performance in your mining projects, that you'll be rewarded down the line for that down the line as well.
I think building on that, there are significant challenges ahead in terms of meeting increasing climate and environmental ambition, which companies have as a core part of their focuses and the investments that they're planning. So I guess trying to work with companies and allow the conditions to make that progress happen is important in terms of creating an environment where you can invest into reducing your carbon footprint and taking on the other points. A worry would be that if we don't create that environment, then those sustainability challenges will become very challenging.
All right. Thank you.
The Commission's communication of the 3rd of September makes it perfectly clear for us. Sustainability and security of supply go hand in hand. We have to address both at all times, and that's true of our plans domestically, it's true of our plans in terms of diversification externally, and it's true of where we want to go in terms of research and innovation as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Here we go. Thank you very much. Another question. I don't know about the time, Emma, but we have time for. Okay. Very short. How does self-sufficiency align with the free trade Europe? It's another viewer question, and I think that's directed to the panel as a whole as well. How does metal self-sufficiency align with a free trade Europe? Anyone?
Well, can I come in, because it's very much a policy question? Yeah. I mean, just take a look at the language from the European Council last Friday. For the first time, you have language in there which says that strategic autonomy is a key principle for the European Union, and it goes hand in hand with open markets, because we're not seeking Europe to be self-sufficient. That doesn't make any kind of economic, environmental or social sense. But it's about having choices, having alternatives to reduce the risk of disruption of supply, such as we've seen this year in areas where we are over-dependent on one or two suppliers of things.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I don't think the Commission is promoting self-sufficiency as the policy. So, but 3% of production is a long way away from that. So I think it's important as well as probably in the IRMA, we need to make it clear to more people how the value chain is it's interdependent, really. The EU mines, the EU smelters and refiners, they need each other. And we need access to sustainable imports as well. I mean, we need all of those things to endure as a industrial ecosystem in Europe. And furthermore, if we became 100% self-sufficient, then we would lose all our market power in terms of trying to encourage others to meet the higher standards that we expect here in Europe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And back to Emma.
Thank you very much, all speakers. Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting morning. Before we close this first session and let you all loose for a while, I'd like you to prepare for the next session by answering one question on biodiversity, because that is the topic for the second session. So you go to the poll on the Menti platform and use the same passcode code if you are not already logged in. It's 6839136. So fill in your answer and we'll see you here at 11 o'clock sharp. Thank you.